So, no one joins yet, but I'll just go ahead and talk about this for a little bit. I've found I get better results from T-squares if I do both sides. So, if there's anything wrong with the edge of the board, it will, one will negate the other. So I can see how crooked my indication of the table line is, and that's okay, because that was the stage of the painting that was in. It's okay to have some foibles, some little things to fix. Quite all right. So these lines are just suggestive anyway. They're not meant to be ultra definitive. I'll change anything that I feel like I don't think works. But I also know my limitations to say that I don't really do straight lines very well. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But yeah, I just think, why have a crooked table line or a terrible perspective or something like that, or a hint of a perspective that shouldn't be, just because I don't do lines, straight lines very well. So that's all. No big deal. I'm just gonna let that set up for a little bit. I'm gonna do the lace on the next sitting. I don't know how long this sitting will be. I'm a little tired. I didn't really feel like painting. I told a student earlier that I would be, and I like to stick to that. I don't like to lead people on, but also too is just, sometimes you just have to power through. I wasn't feeling it today, but so what? It will help determine what I'm going to get done today. So if I wanted to tackle this lace or not, I could have done it without getting the table line just right, but it'd probably be better to get the table line right. So this will be more of a setup sitting. I don't want to do any of that sort of pattern of the lace on top of a wet painting. I'd much, much, much rather have a dry painting. If you want the reason why, it's just because, I can still stay really loose. All I'm going to do is going to take a half paste, just meaning that it's an opaque glaze, and kind of a gray. I don't care if it's a warm gray or a cool gray. It's not really going to matter. It's not going to be the top layer. It's going to be the bottom layer of the weave. And so just as kind of foundational things is there's big areas of the lace that have a lot of pockets of light coming through it and some that are a little bit more solid. So I'm just going to capture the more solid part. This blue I'm putting down here, this is going to be the idea that maybe way in the distance there's the other round of cloth hanging over the other side. I think it's just nice to have something interesting to look at through here. It's going to be so subtle, it's almost going to be hardly noticeable at all. So really certainly don't have to do it. And it's not even that true that it would be there. It's certainly not in my setup. Just it's the idea that maybe it's cascading over the other side too. Again, it could be totally unnecessary. It might not even be that noticeable, but it's something I want. And it's definitely not something I'm looking at. So it's just one of those little intentional decisions that I've actually done before, but still, I'm deciding to do this one even though I don't need to. So I'm going to get this in. It's just going to have a very slight kind of glow to it. And then I'm going to paint like pure black on the bottom as if, you know, there's this lace way in the back ended, and then it's just empty space from a single layer. Again, it's worked for me in the past. Doesn't mean it'll work this time. But if it doesn't work, it's going to just be so subtle that it wasn't a waste of time. And I'm going to say no, because it takes about the same amount of effort as painting black. I'm just mixing, you know, some of my blues, my phthalo and ultramarine with some white and a little bit of black, a little bit of umber, just to make it a little less blue. If it's too blue, it won't really matter. Like I said, when you're seeing through all these little weaves, this complicated weave, almost anything will work back there as long as it's dark. Even if it were solid, it would work. So I'm not terribly concerned about. And this tablecloth is pretty neat. It's got this like leaf pattern that's got this frayed edge, and that's going to be pretty cool. So I don't know, just a little hint of it back here. Now I'm going to go to pure black with just a touch of raw umber, just to give it some stability. And come in here, and you can see how significantly darker that is. And that bifurcation of the the indication as to whether it's cloth back there or just empty space, this is pretty dark. This is extreme dark. So now you can see how impactful that is. But next to all the shells and stuff, this is quite dark. I don't know if that comes through in the camera, because when I'm looking at YouTube, it has kind of a brightness to it, but it's really darker than all of this stuff. Tone of medium, just going to slap it on there. This is going to be bone dry tomorrow, especially all this black oil. Black oil is oils that are usually raw linseed oil or walnut that's cooked with lead monoxide. And the lead serves as a ciccative, and that just, it's like a drying agent. And so I don't drink it. I don't put it into my bloodstream. I don't let it go into open cuts, and I'm safe with it. And that's why if you heard the word lead and you thought instantly that I was going to explode and, keel over right in front of your eyes, that only happens over long exposures, over a long period of time. That's usually when you're not being very careful. The classic example is kids eating like paint from the windowsill. Well, that's going directly into the body, and that is definitely not what I do with lead. Maybe a few little vapors get in when I'm cooking it, or I don't think I'm particularly sloppy with not cleaning my hands after oil painting. But yeah, the last time I got my blood levels checked, my lead was, in acceptable range. So don't call the morgue for me just yet. Don't call the undertaker. I'll be okay. We expose ourselves to a lot of toxic things every day. And a lot of you who paint with cadmiums and things like that, well, that's metals, and those are bad for you too. Just got to pick your poison. And in this case, I'm okay with lead. I know it's bad for me, and I know to be a little careful. And I like what it does to oils. It allows me to paint wet in the wet for a good long time, and then be pretty confident that the next day my painting will be dry. And that's worth it to me. All right, done. That might be a little too high a contrast. I'm just going to blend this out a little bit. But it seems like it's a lot more in the camera than it really is in real life. So maybe you're looking at it like, my gosh, that blue is so bright. Perhaps. I have to make a decision. Does my thick brown line that I painted with the T-square, does that represent the bottom of the table, or does the top of the line represent the, the cloth? I'm going to say that it's the cloth. I don't want to go that thick with the table. And so just being careful, I'm going to trim this line a little bit, and then I'm going to add that little glow of reflected light to the bottom of the table. I'm going to go a little bit darker with the table anyway, so this line will be a little less impactful value-wise. And I'm saying all this knowing that when I get the lace in place, you probably won't really even know that table is in there. It's going to be so subtle. Like all this stuff down here is going to be so subtle. Not my first lace tablecloth, and not my first strategy of creating this sort of table edge and indication that there's cloth on the other side of the table coming through the front layer. So I'm pretty confident that it's going to work. All right, so that's that, and then I'm going to do the brown in here, and that'll be the end of this sitting for down here. I'm going to concentrate on the transverse weaves of the basket, build up the paint a little bit, get into these like frills in here. I might switch gears just to take a mental break and work on some of these shells. But I just wanted to start to get this out of the way first. It's just big paint stuff. It's not really that impactful. It's a good way of warming up for the sitting. And I could get away with almost anything down here. As long as it's dark, it's going to be fine. This is eventually going to be a soft edge. It's just a matter of what I want coming through the lace. Because I would much rather, sometimes mistakes happen, you have to change courses just a little bit, but I would much rather paint the lace just as a superimposition rather than going back and forth between the dark of the holes and the light of the weave on top. What I'd rather do is just superimpose it on top. Just lay down a little brush stroke and be done with it. Not only is it efficient, that's not even the goal. I love efficiency, but that's not it. The idea is layering. So with trees in a landscape painting, say you're plein air painting, and you want to have those sky holes coming through the tree, then you'll notice that sometimes when you're like placing the blue into a tree, it looks like the sky is almost in front of the tree, and it looks really weird. So much better to be a little generous with that sky hole and then cover the edges with the more proximate thing. That's the leaves, all those leaves. That's kind of what I want to do here. I'd much rather just place the little flick of paint on top, and it'll feel more proximate. It'll feel like the top layer is a little closer to me than the layer underneath. And I think it makes a big impact, even though it's barely noticeable. To me, it's worth it. But on top of that, I don't really want to keep constantly going back and forth between darks and light, wet and wet on the lace. I know how to work wet and wet without it mixing and making mud. It's just, why would I want to? It's just, if you can have a dry layer and just do the more proximate thing, like the lace over the openings, much easier. And it's not like I need to do this alla prima. I have a lot to build up on this painting, so I can just do little stages at a time and get back to it when I'm in a nice dry painting and ready to get to it. It might seem like I'm putting off the lace, like I just am dreading it. I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I mean, it's tedious, and even the top layer in the big abstract shapes, it's tedious. It's just busy work, and it's mindless. So I've been debating with the people that have been watching. I see that I have one person watching on YouTube. I don't know who you are though. So I don't know if you've been joining me, but I've been debating whether or not to actually live broadcast the lace, just because it's so slow. I mean, it's really monotonous. For me, it's borderline torture. And then I finish it and I say, "Oh, I'm so glad I did that, and I'm never going to paint lace again." And then here I am painting lace again. So I'm starting to see a pattern. That's like the sixth or seventh time I've done that. I don't know how many lace tablecloths I've done, but maybe it's around 6 or 7. The first one I definitely said, okay, that was it. That was, I'm never going to do it again. But then I not only did it again, but I like tripled the amount of lace tablecloth. And then not only did I do it again, but I did it as a live demonstration with like elite artists. Like it was a lot of pressure on there, especially with the time limits we had for that competition. It was like the whole painting had to be done with exactly 48 hours, right? So not 48 hours straight. We didn't work around the clock, but we had 8 hours a day. We had a morning session of 4 hours and an afternoon session of 4 hours. And my still life was not just a lace tablecloth in a pot or something. It was crazy. It had a globe. It had a skeleton, like, just the head and skeletal arm and hand. It had 2 copper pots. It had a silver tea kettle, a green clear glass bottle, a feather, a string of pearls, a book, a wedding band. I mean, it was nuts. And on top of that, I was going to squeeze in this intricate lace tablecloth. And I did. I pulled it off. But I didn't have a whole lot of time to just sit there and nitpick the lace tablecloth. So it was good to have not only an oil that dries. Like I said, I cooked black oil. I cooked lead into oil. But also this strategy of layering really helped, because I have a dry painting, and then I'm just almost weaving. I know it's an oil paint, it's not fabric, but it's very similar to what I think weaving would be like if I ever did it myself, which I haven't. So I guess I'm assuming. Anyway, all right, good enough. It's not perfect. My line from the T-square is still there, and I'm okay with that, because this is really going to be so subtle after the lace goes on top of it, and I know it. I know I'm going to pull that off. Very confident with that. So, donezo. All right, I really want to get to these transverse lines. I want to get to these little weaves that go around the handle. I really need to articulate the handle up here, or not the handle, this like braid that goes around. And I do need to work the handle. I want to, in order to see the shells through the basket, I had to go a little thinner here. And so I started here, and now these are too thick for this, especially because this would be the closest the basket gets to me is right here. So that ought to actually recede just a little bit. And I'm going to make that happen. It wasn't worth the problem solve in the first sitting, just because I just wanted to map this out and let it dry with those drawing lines, because I had other fish to fry. And then just jostling around things wet and wet, it just wasn't worth it. So now on this sitting, now that it's dry, it is worth it. And these transverse lines are part of the anatomy of the basket. It's like these two weaves that go over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And it seems like they do two at a time. It's like they skip two slats, and then one of them fits between the other and the other's below it. So then, but you hear I'm talking about it. That's me just trying to figure out the anatomy of the basket. Never woven a basket. I'm hardly an expert at it, but I do try to figure out the system of whatever I'm painting. So if I'm painting waves, I'm figuring out the anatomy of the wave. If I'm painting lace tablecloth, there's an anatomy to it. There's a rhythm and there's a system to it that, let's just say my drawing gets a little bit off, I can make it work because I understand the system. I understand the way light wraps around it. Same thing with this basket. This is not like any basket I've ever painted before, and I've painted a few. There's always a system to it. There's a structure. And so I like to really figure out that structure. I like to just think through it. Well, how was it made? How is it held together? And then let's just say I'm a little off. That's okay, right? Because it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be believable. And yeah, I've never felt too beholden that everything in my still life has to be exactly what I'm seeing, mostly because the viewer doesn't ever see what the still life looks like. I can't think of any circumstances in a gallery where I've said, you know what, I'm going to hang the photo of the still life next to the painting. At the end of the day, that doesn't serve me anyway, because this is not, you know, at the end of the day, it's a creation. It's not, I'm not beholden to the still life. If it was from a photo, this is directly from life. But even if it was from a photo, I wouldn't be beholden to the photo. When I'm painting a portrait, you know, that might be a little different in that if it's a commission, I've got to get the likeness. But still, even with the likeness, I'm still taking creative liberty to, you know, just use this color or that proportion or that, you know, that value range, that edge. Those are all things that are mine creatively. And sometimes a client might be like, well, that's not the painting that I want. Yeah, you know, that's the downside of commissions. You're painting their painting. You're not painting your painting that, you know, people can take or leave. It's contract work, and very grateful for getting the commissions that I get. So I usually would never, you know, balk at changing those. But again, it's not a matter of copying the photo. It's trying to capture this depiction of life. And I want to be somewhat realistic, but I also want to be somewhat creative. In staggering this little note doesn't work. It doesn't work yet. And when I say yet, what I really want to say is that I'm going to keep moving, and we'll see how it looks when I've blocked more stuff in. And sometimes it's okay after I've gotten more information in. Even if it's not, though, I'll have more information to get it right when I revisit it because I'll have more stuff to compare it to. I see there's 3 of you on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Love having you here. I'm just kind of painting and rambling, so I hope you enjoy it. But love to have you. For the longest time, I'd just paint with an audiobook or a show going, and I'd rather have people with me. So I can record these as I go too, and that's nice. But I don't know. The company is really nice. So none of this is in the color, and that's by design because let's just say I really don't like what I'm doing. I have this nice paint rag. It's just a cut up t-shirt. It's like an eraser. It's completely gone. Let's just say I really don't like what I'm doing. It's like nothing happened. So I don't have to simultaneously think about color, value, and edges. I can just simply draw lines, almost like this is a piece of charcoal, and I can just. This is as close as I get to having a Control Z for anybody who does digital art. I can just hit that button and it's undone. It just didn't affect anything. So really like this idea that not every stroke that I put down has to be this finished perfect version of the finished painting, that I can do a little bit of setup work and be comfortable with it. I also know that I don't have to be, oh, I already explained that. I also don't have to be so strict to these lines that they are perfect. And so that means that instead of doing what I just did as a demonstration to erase it, I would rather just keep the mistake unless it's egregious. If it's affecting my next few decisions, then that's a consideration for getting rid of it. But what's likely to happen is that when I build in more stuff, either it'll look better and that's fine, I'll just leave it, or I'll change it with a bit of clarity. I'll know where I'm going. It won't be a matter of if I change it. It'll also have a matter of how much, because I'll have more things to compare it to. So I really like that. So I'm just gonna draw for right now. Even if I feel like there's a mistake, I'm just gonna keep on going. And I'll likely make some small adjustments later. It's really super simple to just move, these raw umber lines. The pigment raw umber. I also have to be mindful of distortion. So as this gets into perspective, the weave gets foreshortened and it starts overlapping each other. It's far less distinguishable for each weave out here. And now if I get in automatic mode and I've got my rhythm as to how to paint these and I'm just hacking away and I tune off my observation, I might really miss how much overlap there is as it bends around the corner. So part of the perspective is going to be getting that constriction of the weave going around the corner. I don't want quite as much distinction or separation as these weaves start overlapping, like these are over those ones. And I know to look for it, but easy to miss. It's easy to get that looking really flat. So I was doing that weave by weave. There's a little note in here that doesn't seem to follow the line perfectly. I might make that a little bit more predictable. Even though the basket weave is a little off, the viewer doesn't know that, and it might look wrong to them. And I'm okay with things looking artistically different than what people would expect, as long as it's intentional. To me, it doesn't do me any benefit to copy something that looks a little distorted to me. So I'm looking at this spot thinking I'm going to change it, even though I feel like it's right according to the basket that I'm looking at. And it's just one of the things I have kind of pinned in the back of my mind. These progressively arc up more, partly due to looking up at it, but that's not it. It's not just simply a perspective issue. I think it's also just the style of the basket. It seems more so than the arcs of just like an ellipse. So unlike this one, I'm just kind of mapping out the track that all these double weaves are going in. And I'm not going to bother with that articulation until I get over here. That's just me doing something slightly different just because of demonstration. Just telling you what this stuff looks like. And I know I don't really have to do that, but it's just like up here. I started doing a little bit of work with the values just because in the camera my hand was blocking it. And I wanted to, when I revealed my hand or removed my hand, I wanted at least something to look at. So in here, this is more of like what I'd be doing. Just making sure that all these little intricate weaves follow this path, going from thicker here in the middle as that comes toward me, and receding in space as it gets away from me. So that aspect of it is perspective, but these arcs keep getting progressively more due to the design of the basket, not just simply perspective. So I'm up here at a little challenge. It's not a big deal, but in order to fit this weave pattern with that one, I'm kind of running out of space. That could be the spacing. That could also be that my design isn't exactly like the basket that I'm looking at. So I'm just going to do a little problem solve, but that's the purpose of what I'm doing. That's the reason that I'm not articulating anything. I'm just kind of drawing a line, like a track for this to go into. So in response to that, I'm going to drop this line just a tiny bit. I'm going to give that extra real estate to that middle one. And then the top one will work. Then I also have a further consideration as to when it becomes from a single line to a double line, what side do I add it to? And so I've just come up with that determination. I'm gonna add it downward rather than upward or split, because the line is thinner than what I'm looking at. And so adding the specificity, I've already got that creative direction in my mind. It's just like in portrait, if you feel like say the head is too narrow for the height, well, you know that all your corrections from there are going to either to be to widen the face or shrink the verticals. You've got a narrower range of considerations as you make it go from simple to specific. So that's what I'm doing here. Not only did I feel like the spacing wouldn't work for a single line, but I'm also considering that as this gets articulated, it's going to go from a single line to a double line, and that's going to add thickness. Well, if I just think about what the creative direction of that thickening is going to be, I'll create a system that works. It'll go from simple to specific, but I'll also be adding accuracy as I go. And I do that with a lot of paintings. They don't have to be right at the beginning. They just have to be a suggestion that I can work with to make it the painting that I want by the end product. A lot of artists like a lot more structure than that, and that is not wrong. I'm telling you my way, that I really enjoy painting this way. I like having a dialogue with the painting, and you know, I have a plan, but it's not something I have to follow so rigidly. And I like this little discoveries that I can make during the painting sitting. Okay, that's going to fit a lot better. And that was a 2-second adjustment. a little bit more than 2 seconds. All of you who have a stopwatch. What's going on with Sorry, I was just checking something real quick. Four seven six six 5 651 4152. That's right. All right, whatever. Technical stuff. Sorry about that. All right, back to it. So a couple missing elements from this painting, although I think I lost it. I'll have to recreate it, but there was a little shell coming out of the side here. I like that. I'm going to put that back in. This shell is going to get this sort of lattice of light coming through and projecting onto the shadow. I just wasn't ready for it yet. So that's going to be a really neat element. I'm going to keep building this iridescence in here, and then of course the lace tablecloth is going to change the entire painting. It's going to go from having restful areas to being a really busy painting. Everything's going to just be detail everywhere, texture everywhere. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It's just my vision for this painting is a play on textures. So, you know, the spiky shells, the dots, the iridescence, the lattice of shadows, the basket weave, the lace. It's just a texture nightmare. And hopefully I pull it off well by the end. We'll see. All right, so I'm ready to start weaving this together. Now that this pattern is about what I see, I maybe overdid that arc just a little bit, but I kind of like it. So this is flatter than this one. This is curvier than the one beneath it. This is curvier than that one. This is curvier than that one. The shell is the basket is a little irregular in that there's a flatness to the side planes, but this is really round on the edges. So it's not like going to follow a perfect elliptical perspective line, and it's made of little weaves. Like it's a man-made thing. It's not necessarily curving just simply because of perspective, but also because of the design of the weave. So I'm thinking it works with this little design here, and then I'm going to do more of like what I did here. The pattern that I see is that each horizontal slat goes over 2 of the vertical slats, and then there's an overlap. And then it's just a matter of figuring out, is it light, is it shadow, or is it reflected light? And if I can keep it in those categories, then I'm going to be really close. It's going to be believable, and that's really all I care about is it artistic and it's believable. I don't want it to be a question as to whether it just looks odd on the first impression. I want it to be rather, you know, that first impression just says weave, three-dimensional. You feel that story of the light on there. If it checks those boxes, I'm really, I'll be really happy with it. So with each of these double weave patterns, we're going to have a weave that goes through the middle of one before it. Yeah, so the way it works is we've got this one line going over two baskets and then going behind two, then coming back over two, then behind two. And then the one under it is going over as the one behind it is going, you know, obviously behind it. So that's the anatomy. If I worry about that too much, then I'll be painting super, super stiff. So I just kind of want the gist of what's going on. If I can put it into words, then I'm usually going to figure it out. It's usually going to work. I can't think of a painting where if I could give it that kind of thought as to how it works, that it's not going to work in the end product. But again, you know, I don't want to paint too arrogant either. I'm not going to assume it's always going to work. I can also thin these lines. So if I had a clean eraser brush, all I have is like a little black oil and a clean bristle. I can trim these lines to be thinner if they get a little thick. What ends up happening, and I should be disciplined enough to know better, but these little pointy brushes hardly hold any paint, because really the only place you want to make the mark is on the tip of the brush for any kind of precision. If I'm doing big masses I can press, I wouldn't use a tiny brush like this. I would use a filbert or a flat. And for these precision brushes, they hardly hold any paint. And so the bad habit that you really have to be conscious of is while this runs out of paint, the inclination is to keep the mark going by pressing. Once you press, you're making a really sloppy mark. And so if I want this to have any sort of believable pattern to it, I need to have the discipline to go back to the painting palette more often to reload the brushes. Or else these lines are going to get heavy. They're going to not be very explanatory. I'm going to have to be thinning them with probably the paint around it. And that, I don't know, that causes more trouble than just going back to the palette more often or catching where I've made a mistake and I need to trim the line a little bit, because I want these to be very well explained. The viewer won't care. I mean, honestly, they're not going to look at the detail so tightly that they say, okay, this basket weave ought to be doing this or that. But if it's something that on the first impression looks awkward, I've lost the viewer. That's the same thing with anatomy and perspective. The first impression tells people, does that figure look believable or awkward? And those are almost always perspective, anatomy problems. Same thing with landscape. That perspective either looks instantly believable or awkward. But I don't know very many viewers of artwork their first impression is that they like it, and then they dig through the perspective and say, okay, no, I no longer like it because the perspective isn't perfect. And the same thing is true the other way. It's not going to rescue a painting either. You're not going to look at the basket and have a negative first impression and then say, well, I do like it because the anatomy of the basket is okay. It's just never going to happen. So I give it this much thought, just so that first 3 seconds of somebody viewing the painting it gets instantly acceptable, and then the detail really just already did its job. It's done for. Seems like a lot of work for very little, but I think it's important for a painting like this. And on the next painting, I'm going to take out my boredom of this painting of all these little nitpicky lines and just do something super splashy, like the figure painting I did on Friday. If you want to look at the live, that one wasn't terribly planned out. We had a tour going through the studio, and I got interrupted so many times to tour people around the studio. Like I knew it was coming. I just didn't. It's hard to not know how much painting time you're going to get. Like if I know from the beginning it's going to be a really short sitting, I'm only going to get like an hour and a half or something, I'll paint the heck out of that hour and a half. But if it's like randomly, like I'm going to maybe get 2 hours, maybe I'll get 1 hour, maybe I'll get 3. It's just so hard to keep a decent pace. So I really started off a little on the careful side. Well, not really. I was going pretty fast, but by the end, I was just really just slapping paint on there and then getting interrupted and then getting back to it. So my Friday nights are all usually about like these crazy painting challenges. That was plenty crazy as a painting challenge. So definitely not complaining, because I do that kind of stuff anyway, like make it really hard to paint. But that one was particularly hard to paint. Hi, Sandra. Shame too that model was wearing a pretty dress. A lot of times we'll get a nude figure, but this time was a really pretty dress, again, because we had the tours going through. And it's not like any of them would shriek if they saw a nude figure, but there were little kids that came through. So in hindsight, it was a good thing that we did it that way. But I think it's a fun challenge anyway. Get a nice little pose. I always tell the models, it's like, well, what do I wear? And I say, just imagine if you hired a artist to paint your portrait, what would you wear? And they usually come up with something good. All right, so Sandra, you joined late. Oh, yeah, a lot of people were there. I felt bad for them that I took these long breaks, but I had absolutely no idea how many people I'd be touring. It didn't seem that well advertised, like the this art walk for in Baltimore in the Station North community, and yeah, I mean it wasn't like we were mobbed, because it wasn't groups didn't come at a time. It was like a group of 2, and then they would be leaving as a group of 2 would come in, and then they would be leaving as another group would come in. So it was just really spaced out. It wasn't like a rush period, and then I could get back to my painting. So yeah, sorry about the breaks. If it seemed like you were watching, sorry about that. It's yeah, it was frustrating, but we were happy to have the groups going through there. Yeah, start one, Laura. They're not. If you find a nice studio space, I don't charge enough because I don't really do it to make any money. I want to make sure that I can cover the model and then maybe a little bit extra just in case we have a lean Friday night where that money I'm responsible for it, so it comes out of my money if we have a lean Friday night. But yeah, if you can organize a group, just make sure the model's covered. If you want to make money, actually, obviously charge more. But you know, we have that nice studio at the Schuler School, so I mean, it's a lot easier for me. But I'm sure if you could find a school nearby and they have an empty 3-hour slot somewhere, yeah, you just find models, And we usually just do one model per night. Some studios do multi-week poses. Some studios just do gestures. I mean, I really enjoy gestures, but if I'm going to do a painting from start to finish, then I really would rather have 3 hours. But yeah, no real rules to it. You're going to get a flavor for what the participants like, but my attitude on that is, yes, I like to accommodate them for like lighting and pose and backgrounds and things like that. But really, it's my session that, because I don't get to paint very often with 2 kids and a lot of responsibilities, that's my session to paint. So I'm sure going to make it flow my way, but it seems like everybody likes the session anyway, so that's not a big deal. It's not like I'm ruling it with an iron fist. But I take requests sometimes. We did one session to where my challenge was I was going to do 20-minute poses, 20-minute paintings of the model, and each one would have a completely different skin tone. So I painted this male model green in one 20-minute block, and then he'd get into a new pose, and I'd paint him purple, and then he'd get into another one, I'd paint him blue, and then another one I'd paint him yellow. It was kind of fun. So if you tuned in, not last week, but the week before, not this Friday, but the one before, uh, I stopped early and then deleted it just because I don't know. It turned out fine. I still have it. Maybe I'll do a post, but the problem I had with it was the camera. I just couldn't get the head out of glare, and it took so long for this figure to emerge from all these dry paintings underneath. It probably had like 10 figures underneath, but those colorful figures were in the background. But to get the model to emerge from the painting it took like maybe 2 hours, and then the last 1 hour I was able to really make the painting dramatic, but it just didn't seem like good enough video to have on my channel, so I pulled the plug on it. But it was fun. All right, so I like how this is going. Doesn't look like much yet. If I wanted to be super precise, I could have thinned these lines even more, but I'm going to be painting opaquely over them anyway. So I didn't worry about that so much. I just want the design to be okay, and I want the anatomy to be okay. And that could be the same thing, but by design, I mean these arcs and the spaces, and the anatomy, I mean that sort of over, under, the way one weave tucks into the other. I just want that to be consistent. And then I'll do a block in of where the lights are. Well, I'm just going to stick to middle tone and darks for a second, and then I'll do highlights. And then I'll probably move on to another spot, just because I don't have to perfect it wet into wet. I can let it dry, and I can come in with my first impression again and make better decisions on how to pull it together. It just depends on the pace of the painting. So, I mean, if you've been watching my Fridays, obviously with a 3-hour sitting from a live model who takes a 10-minute break every 20 minutes, I've got to move pretty fast. That's going to be a completely different feel from a painting like this, to where it's like I can put this off for a week and get back to it when I feel like. But I've been building my YouTube channel on alla primas. So this is a change of pace. And, well, literally, we were just talking about the pace. So that sort of panic to get things done in the moment isn't here. I can really just think about, well, what's best for the painting at this time, and I'll get back to finishing this next section, or this section that I'm working on now. And different feel. It's a lot slower. It's a lot maybe less spontaneous with the brushstrokes and color. I really love alla prima for that, but it's rewarding in its own right, and you can get a lot more maybe impressive of a looking painting. Oh, so Sandra, yeah. So thanks for thanks for doing that. Um, am I going to start the lace? I was going to if I didn't really want to do a T-square to the table. So now all that's wet paint. So on the next sitting, that's going to be bone dry, and then I'm going to map out my pattern, and that'll get bone dry, and then I'll just do these little, really obnoxiously time-consuming little hatches of paint that are going to be weaved. Again, just thinking of the anatomy of what I'm looking at and making it my own. But yeah, not this sitting. This sitting, I did the foundation work for this after doing the T-square, and now I've gotten the kind of map of where I'm going with the transverse lines. I want to shrink some of these a little bit, get some highlights in there, get some more convincing cast shadows and the overlaps. And then maybe I'll do a little bit of work on these. These all need more work, especially this urchin shell is going to have all these little dots on it to do. I'm going to glaze this a little warmer with maybe some Indian yellow. This just is thin paint, so I'm going to thicken it up, and then I'm going to do all these little, I mean, this shell is crazy. It has these little lines that like bend around the form, and then there's little light red slashes on it. It's crazy. If you look at my website for a painting called the Shell Collection, it's the same shell. And it took a long time to develop that one. So I don't know how much live filming I want to do for the tablecloth. That's just going to be tedious for me and for anybody who'd watch. I don't know about the refinement of that. That might be okay to watch. I don't know. We'll see. The urchin shell, I don't think will be too bad. That's very repetitive too. I mean, the detail work of this painting is going to take some time. It's just that's nature of the beast for this kind of painting. All right. Value wise, that was a little dark. And technique wise, that was kind of a swing and a miss. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a more elegant tool for the job. I don't consider any of these things mistakes. If I make a brush stroke and I can glean an insight from it, it's good. Jeez. I really debated not doing this tonight. Tired. To get up early. I taught a class. I've been playing with the kids out in a park. Got them to bed, which was sometimes it goes super smoothly, sometimes it doesn't. Tonight didn't. It just took a long time. It wasn't like they were misbehaving or anything. It just they weren't settling down. I've been reading the Lord of the Rings with the older boy, but at the same time, I was entertaining the 5-year-old who doesn't have that kind of attention span. So I really owed him a lot of attention after reading the Two Towers to the older boy. Sometimes he falls asleep, which is kind of nice. But I could have gotten down here a little sooner. I had just wrapped up putting away, getting the 5-year-old to sleep. I had to rush down here, and I just barely made it by 9 o'clock. So this little tester here is going to be the most time consuming. It's the first one. But once I get a rhythm for what I'm doing, it's going to get automatic. It's just going to get, okay, I know the colors that I'm using. I know the thickness of the paint that I got to use. I've worked out the kinks of the anatomy, that sort of system that the weave uses when whoever wove it put it together. And so with it, it's going to be the most problem solving. If I get the colors wrong, it's okay. As long as the drawing kind of works, I can glaze it and tweak the colors. So I don't really want to even have to be that specific. I'd much rather just draw and figure the rest out later. Again, it's not like I have to get it perfect. I just have to have it good enough to where the system works, and then the glaze will get it richer, and then I can fine tune it if I have to. And if I have to, that just simply means that the first impression doesn't work, and I need to do an extra little step to make it work. That's really the only distinction. If I step in with a fresh eye and it looks like a well executed basket weave, then that could be done. As long as the story of the light works. So if you hear me say story of the light, it's just to say that the light source has a direction, intensity, and color to it that I want to have wrapping around every item of this painting. And if it does that, then there's a consistency and a believability. So I've invited people into a depth because of the way light wraps around it. That's really the only way we see things. So if you break it down that simply, you're just going to say that, well, everything you see that is only because light is bouncing into your eye. And it's believable because we know the characteristics of the light source that's making that happen. Then your brain does some things on the side. It's obviously more complicated than that, but from a visual level, that's really all we get. If there's some kind of base color to this weave, well, the light does this to it in the highlight. It does this in the middle. There's glancing lights. It does this in the turning shadows. Reflected light can be a bit of a wild card, but usually it's going to stay in the shadow range of values at least, so it's limited. And it's always going to be based on, what's reflecting, how close is the thing that's reflecting, and how receptive to the light the thing that's receiving the reflected light is. So if you understand that without hurting your brain, then even that's pretty self-explanatory. And what I mean by not hurting your brain is that when you learn this stuff so automatically that you don't actively think about it, then it all happens pretty fast and a little bit not effortlessly, because there's always so much to get right, and then there's that pesky execution thing. But it's like tying your shoe. If you think about how complex tying your shoe is, it's a lot of steps. It's very technical, but we've done it so many times and so automatically that we don't actively have to think about the steps. It just effortlessly falls in place. Well, executing an oil painting is not effortless. It's really quite difficult, but the idea of understanding what light does to objects, what you learn anatomy so well that you can make it part of that abstract squinting, and you can make it automatic for problem solving. You can say what doesn't work because you know what has to be. It just makes the process a lot more accessible. But then execution is always going to be difficult. Placing the brushstroke in just the right spot, having the patience to build it up. I mean, all that's tricky. So there's a philosophy of a former sculpture teacher of mine that always said it, like anytime anybody would say, well, that's easy for you to say, he'd say, well, it doesn't get easier, the results get better. And I really wholeheartedly believe that. This is not easy, but all the intricate knowledge, if you added it all up, it's really a lot of information that goes into every brushstroke. And if some of that knowledge is automated, then it's a lot more accessible. So my first impression of what I'm doing here is that they're going to look better when I get the cast shadows in. So right now they're a little clunky and a little bit big. Some of these over here are a little too bright. Again, I'm just putting a pin in it. I've noticed those things, and I'm going to keep moving forward. As I build information, I'm going to get a better insight as to how to make it work. And I'm already developing strategies for that. Well, I just articulated. I'm really coming in with the cast shadows, and the shadows in between the weaves are going to be fine. As far as this being too bright, that's going to be a glaze on the next sitting. I'm not going to worry about that. So it would be something I'd worry about early on. You know, when you get so much experience that you are really okay with it not looking right yet, knowing that these are just stages that have information, and information is better than nothing. So this is better than having a blank canvas and I'd have to start all over again every time I made a mistake. I'd have to wipe it out. I don't paint that way. Thank you, Sandra. That got pale. Jeez. I was mentioning too is like I said all these critical things about this, not because I don't like it, because you know there's things that I don't feel like are working yet. If I keep moving, sometimes they end up working. Just because I built more context, and it's just like, oh, that's not as I thought it wasn't working, and maybe it is, right? So that's another reason I like to just defer the idea that everything has to be perfect right off the bat. I'm just taking notes as I go, and if I just blindly execute those things, I might miss something that's working better than I thought. So I'd rather just step away from it and come in with the first impression. So I'm going to get all this stuff blocked in. It's to my advantage to work on very tight technical stuff when it's dry paint anyway. Not that I can't work wet in the wet. Like I said, I mean, I do a lot of alla prima, but it'd just be so much better for not only having a fresh mindset, but dry paint to really opaquely cover something up without really thick paint or removing paint. Just so much easier. And I'm in no rush because this painting already is going to take forever. I mean, I knew that from the very first brushstroke. This painting is going to take a very long time. Ooh, that doesn't work. Done. What's funny is those drawing lines were a little misplaced, but they'll become the cast shadows that I would have to paint anyway. So leaving them makes a lot of sense too. I want to start shifting into more shadow than light when I get over here. So it might feel like it's getting incomplete, and that's why. It's only part of that is in the light. And then by the time I get here, only just like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of these little slats catch light. You know, loose painting, I could just leave it. It would feel out of harmony to have a loosely painted basket and lace tablecloth. So that's definitely not going to be the case here. It looks, I don't know, looks pretty good on the camera. It looks a little blocky, cartoony here. You know, I'm comfortable with that. I was just saying how different it looks in the camera. It's funny because this looks totally washed out on the camera, but in real life, it's got a ton of color in it. So I guess it compromised this and made that better. All right. Do I need any more? It'd be nice to have an incomplete one right here. It started and then turned into shadow. So then all this gets pretty intricate. I should probably switch to either the darks or the reflected light. I'm going to switch to reflected light, which would make the source of the light this shell. For these weaves in here, the light source isn't the lamp that's coming down this way, it's the shell that's coming up this way. So I want to make sure that the shadow is darker than the direct light, but lighter than the foundational layers in here. So I have a parameter. So the way reflected light works is like, if I can reference this shell, the light bouncing off of that shell into the weave has to be significantly reduced. So I'm just going to say matter of factly in a painting like this, that anything that's receiving direct light from this sharp, you know, spotlight that I have is going to be brighter than anything that's reflecting off of either the cloth or shells or whatever. Now, I don't even have highlights in here yet. I'd rather get the shadows first, but the reflected light is only a contextual brightness. It really relies on having brightness around it to be visible at all. And so it's just a value to be careful with, because when you look in the shadow, it might look bright, but it's really, really not. Yeah, I bet that did take forever, Laura. I don't know. I've done some doozies. I've done some really highly detailed paintings, and it's just, I don't know. For me, it's not quite as fun as the alla primas or looser paintings, but I have done a lot. A lot of the awards and stuff that I've won have been the tighter paintings. It's not like I don't like painting them. It's just I love the idea of them, and I love the block in, and I like the start of detail, and then it's just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this again? Because by brushstroke 1 million, it's just, oh my gosh, it can get tedious. And then you finish the painting, and it's just like, oh, that was great. You know, that was so fun. You know, I'm so glad I did that. And then the cycle repeats itself. So right now, I haven't done so much detail that I've gotten into that, like, banging my forehead saying, why am I doing this stage yet? But it's coming. When that lace starts getting blocked in, oh my gosh. The block in will be fine. The beginning of the pattern will be fine. But then midway through, it's just going to be like, Brushstroke 1,000,001, brushstroke 1,000,002, brushstroke 1,000,003. You know, I got the privilege of watching Will Wilson paint a few times. If you don't know his artwork, you should look it up. It's willwilsonstudio.com. Just fantastic artist. He graduated from the Schuler School in 1979, and that's really all he's done career-wise. He played drums in a band too, but his career has only been art, like not art and retail, right? Just art. And brushstroke counter. But anyway, watching him paint, the first sitting is exciting. He's splashing down paint. It's broken color and these beautiful brushstrokes everywhere. And then he'll blend that down, sand it. And then the next sitting, little less splashy, but still very splashy. Just chops of paint everywhere. They're placed perfectly. It looks beautiful. And then he'll blend it down and sand it again. And then by layer 20, it's like a tiny, like number one sable, peck, peck the entire surface. Like it could be a 3648. Just it's he can't even stay engaged with it either. So he always had a movie playing in the background, or like The Simpsons or something. I mean, awesome artwork. I asked him about it because he had a one-man show in 05, and he didn't have enough artwork for it because you had to have 40 pieces to do a one-man show at John Pence Gallery, which doesn't exist anymore, but it was a really high-end gallery in San Francisco. And John Pence the gallerist actually limited customers to 2 per customer because they would have sold out too fast. These paintings that were like 2 or 3 sittings. And I asked him that, I was like, well, if they sell so well and they're so well received, why wouldn't you do more of that? Why would you do these tedious paintings if you didn't have to? And he just said, you don't pick your style picks you. And he also said it's like he doesn't want his paintings to be about the brushwork. He wants it to be about the meaning of the painting. Like he's telling a little narrative or a sequence of maybe the light going through the still life or something. There's more meaning to it than splashes of color and loose brushstrokes. And so yeah, I understood that. I got it. But I'll tell you how exciting those early sittings are for watching him paint. It's just so incredible. But yeah, he's right. He's been super successful with that tighter style. Really great. He was my brother's babysitter. So my brother and he had a really great relationship. Like I knew him, but I was the little brother of Andy to Will. So I don't want to pretend like the relationship was too big. Okay, so I did a little drawing correction there. These reflected lights aren't quite right. They start pretty good here, but they really need to fade away here. Once I realized the mistake, it was just like, do I want to fix it or do I want to just let it dry and then glaze it? And I'll make up my mind on that later. There's almost like, I hate to minimize anybody's like medical stuff, but it's almost like triage in that if I get to this, if I finish this, then I'll get to that. If I finish that, I'll get to this. If I finish that, I'll get to that. Whatever's the biggest need, and then I'll go back to something like this that could just be fixed with a glaze. So I'm in no rush to tweak that. I just have another mental note saying, good enough for now. And I have it in my mind that it's not quite working yet, and I'll get back to it. but I definitely don't want to make it seem as like I'm saying it's as serious as triage. That's definitely not what I'm trying to say. Okay. So this is coming along. I'm gonna work out the weave down here too. This is a little bit more intricate of a weave, but it has a system too, just like the rest of it. And if I don't get that system exactly right, but I have a system that works, then I check that box. The first impression to the viewer works, unless they're a basket weaving expert, and sure hope not, but sell it to somebody else. There's a Twitch scene that has a Control Z counter as an overlay. Oh yeah, how many times do you undo things? Oh, okay, Sandra. I'll either do it live and everyone can watch, and it'll be recorded for live videos on YouTube, or I'll definitely record it. It's just whether I do it live. So if I record it without going live, and then I'll just speed it up for the video when I put all these different sittings together for a final product. It's just, I mean, we're talking hours of just pick, 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 because these brushes hardly hold any paint. You don't want to go too many. This will run out of juice, and then you'll either start pressing or you'll do nothing, and it's just, it's very tedious. I just don't know how enjoyable that would be. It's just a lot of times it's like, well, what am I doing? This is not enjoyable for the painting itself, but watching it, oh my gosh, can't imagine. Like, to do all this, and this is not the tedious part. You just wait. Yeah, Sandra, Will's work is very meaningful. Like, even if you don't get the meaning, there's always more to it than just a pretty painting. Not that there needs to be, because there's plenty of artists that do really beautiful paintings that they're not going to challenge the nature of humanity or anything, but they're really pleasant to look at, and that's great. No problem there. But his usually has it both, like meaningful and really, really well executed. And so, yeah, just pretty awesome. I do quirky things. I don't always tell a narrative or anything, but this is going to be a pretty straightforward, just super busy painting. But some of them play with gold leaf, some of them play with iridescence, or exotic color use, or whatever. I have fun with paint, but yeah, those narrative paintings, they take a very long time to pull off exactly right, and they're worth it a lot of the time. But getting nowhere fast. I have a painting my grandmother did of a cat in a basket, and the basket looks perfect until you look closely at it, and there's almost nothing there. It's like she developed a little section near the cat, and the rest fades to almost nothing. You definitely don't pick that up on the first impression, or at least I didn't. And that's just the coolest thing. Wish I had a photo of it. I'd post it. on the, maybe in the chat or something, but I don't. There's a string of weave here that probably makes sense to the person that wove it, but it doesn't make sense to me, so I'm gonna ignore it. And yeah, we'll hope for the best. What time is it? 10:40 or 10:30? That little jerk reaction was the malt stick slipping. When that happens, when the brush is down, that's a disaster. I caught it just in time. I don't do particularly steady hand. I don't have particularly steady hands, so the malt stick is really important. Some people can just place a brush stroke exactly where they want it to. That's just really not my strong suit. I get precision not because, I get tight paintings and realistic paintings not because of precision. I usually have to wrangle these shapes until they work because I don't place them just right. But I know people like, especially miniature artists, that they can just place that brushstroke exactly where they want it every time. But I need the malt stick to steady my hand, and even with that, I'll make little brushstroke errors. Nothing egregious, just, I don't know, probably not even worth complaining about. Oh, yeah, back to my point. Yeah, so the malt stick every once in a while it has a little like rubber knob at the top. If that slips off the painting, then the whole thing, you're trying to get this precise line, then all of a sudden it's migrating down the painting. Wet and wet, that's a disaster. But it wouldn't be so bad right here. I did on my channel. There's a painting that I did of a holly plant, right on aluminum, and the idea was to leave the raw aluminum for the background. Well, I had a malt stick slip that just went like right through all the leaves, and now all of a sudden there was this like oil painting haze over all this background that I was really trying to keep clean, and so like on the video is like, no big deal, I'll fix it. Inside, I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. I was ready to freak out. But I was able to complete the painting, fix the damage, complete the painting, and then I took some solvent and cleaned up that haze in the background. It wasn't a big deal in the end, but I was really just like not ready to freak out, but Not terribly happy about it, let's put it that way. But I'm communicating all these lines with a dark line. Some of these will be communicated better with a light line for highlight rather than a dark line for shadow. But again, if I wanted to do all this technical drawing while simultaneously changing all the colors and doing all the different value changes for highlights and light and reflected lights and all this stuff, it would take a ton of concentration in a very long time. I'd have to slow it down big time. So I don't want to go any further if the design doesn't work. That's all I'm really just doing right now. It's just drawing lines as if the umber were a stick of charcoal. Very, very intricate pattern. So the more simplification, the better. All right, so pretty soon I'm going to map out those shadows for all these little tracks. That'll look a lot better. I might plop a few highlights on there. And then I'll probably call the weave for a little while. Just be done with the weave for just a bit. If I still have the steam for it, I'll work on some of these shells and then call it a sitting. When that dries, the very next sitting, I promise, will be the big block in for the lace. But that block in is not going to be terribly elegant. I don't worry about my starts on anything to be elegant. Just like I'm just doing drawing lines on here. It's going to be big, blocky, flat shapes, and those big, blocky, flat shapes either work or don't work on the design level. Like if they don't show that pattern being consistent throughout the whole thing, really easy to just wipe them off and start again. I'd be less inclined to do that the right way, just recognizing that something doesn't work, if I went really technical with all the undulation of the cloth and all the little tiny openings and the little flicks of paint. There's no way. I wouldn't want to change anything if I worked that hard at it. And if I would make the right decision to make the change that I need to make, but I really wouldn't be happy about it. So my system was really difficult at first because, yeah, everybody wants their painting to be beautiful and accurate and elegant right from the start. They want that person to look like a likeness and that the perfect sparkly eyes right off the bat. I've gotten really far away from that. I've been embracing abstraction. I want my shapes to just be that squint level and leave them there until they're right. And then I get these little strategies based on experience on how I want to layer it and the timing of it. And that idea that, like, okay, not assuming anything's going to go well. So I give myself a lot of latitude. It's just like, okay, I'm going to paint on this until it gets to a certain look of accuracy and depth, light and shadow. And then if I check that box, then I can move on to the next slot. But I don't perfect anything. My idea is to get everything built up globally rather than specifically. And then I can develop a focal point. Like if I wanted this to really pop over everything else, then I'd get those real technical details in there. And then everything from there would be a reference point back to this. But I'm still missing a major, major element with that lace tablecloth. So it's way too early to decide focal point and refine it. I mean, the decision could already be there, but the idea that I'm going to make one spot perfect right now, that's not even on my radar. All right, so this has some technical things going on, but when I squint, it all disappears. So I'm going to leave it for now. I'm going to get some of these shadows in place, and then I'm going to reevaluate the weave pattern just on the simple level. And then I could work on this banding on the edges. That's going to take some time. I could work on the handle. I could work on the shells. Anyone else hold their breath while they do details? I've gotten busted just like in different stages of the painting. You'll hear me go, get called out on it. You're doing detail again, aren't you? All right, let's put some highlights on some of those. Just see if it's working. Now, if I compare the highlights on the basket to the highlights on the iridescent shells, or even the brightness of these bright shells, it's not even close. And those are brighter than the bright parts of the glazed tablecloth. So that's where I want to be really careful not to make a pure white highlight. And just thinking of like, well, there's a system of priorities, like what's the brightest light? The tendency that people get in trouble with is that they want to look in this little tight spot and say, okay, I see really bright light and really dark shadows. And that might work if you were only painting this spot, but if you had to compare it to other things in the painting, it might not even compute. Like these highlights in here, yeah, they're pretty bright among just the weave, but it's not very bright among these other elements. So not only that, but you don't really want the eye to go to the weave too much. I'd much rather it maybe be in here. So just sometimes, even if it's not the brightest light, I consider elevating some highlights and diminishing others. In this case, I would consciously not let this be the brightest light. I'm just missing like crazy with these highlights. Swing and a miss. The other thing I could do in this weave is I could start painting some of these turning values in, but I don't think it's worth it. And by turning values, I mean that, okay, it hits the highlight and then it starts turning into a rich red brown, and then it starts turning into a grayer red brown. And yeah, that's all technically true. But the problem with that is that it will require a lot of specificity, and I'm just not ready for that. So what I'd rather do is just let it dry, even if these little weaves are a little on the flat side. I'll glaze it with like a burnt sienna, and then I'll come back in with the highlights. And so I don't even have to get the highlights right on this sitting. It's just, I know I'm going to be glazing over them anyway. So if they accidentally got a tiny bit too bright, that'd be okay. In fact, I'd lose them a little bit anyway. So if they are keyed in too bright, the glaze would keep them kind of bright. And it wouldn't hurt the painting at all. So I am considering it, each highlight as to how do highlights compare around the whole composition, and making sure that I'm being pretty conscious of where I put brightest light and where this next value falls in the spectrum of lights. But on second thought, it's not that big a deal that I get it right, considering that I'm going to be glazing anyway. As I get a little bit more technical in here, I can see where some of the weaves need a little bit of an adjustment. And so I've got to decide, is that something I want to address now or later? And I'm just going to make the choice to do it later. Like right in here, this weave doesn't quite work. It like flares out right here for no reason, like not because of perspective. And so I don't know. I'm just going to think about that when I get back into it. Ow. Keeping my value range pretty simple right now. I tend to do that anyway. I try to categorize the light. So highlights I usually start with just two values. Is it light or is it shadow? And shadows include things like all those little turning grays, and they include the reflected lights. And then I can break that down into highlights within the lights, turning shadows, reflected lights, cast shadows in the shadow. And then if all that works, then I can get all that finesse. But I don't like to go any further than the squint level and those 5 values until those are right. Then it can be time for detail. Like I'm starting to get nitpicky now just because these shapes are really important. But they were on a foundation of no slats at all. Then I drew the slats in. Now I'm doing all these more complicated weaves. and I'm painting through these little openings. I might have to paint those back in. Like there might be a little bit of error, like right there and right there. But we'll cross that bridge. These little weaves are three-dimensional. So the top of the form might be that rich red, but the bottom might start turning to shadow. And right now those are a little flat. And that's okay, again, because I'm going to glaze it. So I'm going to anticipate that glaze and what it's going to do and decide if it's something I do have to address on this sitting or not. And a lot of the decisions are just going to be that I don't have to address it. The red is going to get in because of the glaze, and then the highlight comes back on top, it'll automatically turn. And so the more you can anticipate what your painting is going to do, you can definitely figure that out into your timing of the painting and the amount of panic that you have. So if this were alla prima, I'd better be doing things to make it dramatic and accurate, but because it's a lot of sittings on a rather tedious, slow painting, there's a lot of things that I'll just say, okay, this is the setup, and it doesn't have to be right yet. All right, that's coming along. I'll just put a few little highlights there and a few down here. That might be the basket for the day. I mean, except for that might be this section for the day. I can see the need for a lot more reflected light, especially down in here. I'd rather play that too dark than too light early on, because it can really kill three-dimensional form. And if it gets confused with the lamp instead of bouncing off of the tablecloth or bouncing off the shell, then I've really told the wrong story of the light. It'll be like this never turned away from the lamp, that it's coming out and catching the lamp, which makes it really flat and confusing. So again, if I can put in these categories, it's like, well, which one of those 5 values is it supposed to get? I can really figure out a lot. I can really know what to be cautious for, know where to go bold, know what colors to use because of warm light or cool light. Okay, highlights. I'm going to be real generous with highlights down here just because I know I'm going to glaze it pretty substantially, more so than up there. So I can just be pretty bold, putting a lot of highlights everywhere, leaving the mid-tone that I have. I'm going to do a little bit more with shadow. Fun stuff. Take a little bit of the table too. Better. All right. Yeah, I'm gonna take a pause on that. Maybe I'll work on that handle or this braid. Almost 11. All right, I'm definitely not going past midnight tonight. I'm tired. All right, so whenever I work on a new section, I like to get a little, if I'm using medium, I'll use medium. I'm just painting with black oil right now. So anytime that I want to paint on a section, I just want to give it a little film of oil to allow the paintbrush to glide. I don't think anybody was tuned in yet when I put medium down on the basket or down here. Those are the only two places I've worked so far today. And so I'm just going to hit this area. I know it's dry. I'll do that little braiding. So like on the camera, it looks a little tighter than it really is in person. So there's a chance I can leave a lot of it behind and not get it perfectly technical, but I probably will. But good enough for now, definitely. So I'm going to start this with a little bit of a half paste. And that just means, again, just a opaque glaze using opaque paints. I'm going to separate out light from shadow on just the simplest level. I'm going to do a glaze too of the shadow shape. And I could have done the glaze first if I didn't want it to be cloudy. It's just, I don't think I need to worry about that. Especially not on this sitting, because it's hardly going to be finished. But the reason I want to do it this way is because the drawing lines that I'm going to be putting on top are probably going to be too bold. This is a pretty subtle pattern. I think it's worth doing. But it'd be really hard to get it subtle enough on the first sitting. So what I'm going to do is make it just a little too bold. This film that I'm putting on top is going to make it a little bit dull, just working wet and wet. But I'll be half pasting it again to subdue the darkness of the lines and bring the contrast down. So I don't want a whole lot of contrast. Or bring too. I mean, contrast is synonymous with just attention grabbing, and some things should be attention grabbing, some things shouldn't. And this is an example of a shouldn't. It's a nice little detail note that might be noticed if I've already grabbed people's attention from across the room, but it's not something that they'll notice from any sort of distance. Definitely not worth making it so bold that it does that and crosses the border into something that should be high contrast, or something that just by the nature of what it is, or something that is catching so much attention because I want it to be a focal point. And it's neither of these. It shouldn't be bold, nor is it a area that I want to attract a lot of attention. I have a direction of where I want to take the painting. I always have a lookout for whether or not the painting has something to say about that. So sometimes I'll change the style because it's working, or sometimes I'll add elements or change the nature of the brushstroke or something like that, just because either it's not working or the painting kind of displayed something that I wasn't anticipating, and it could be great. It could be something that I feel like, oh man, that's a happy accident, and I didn't expect that. Or alternatively, I could think in my mind's eye that it's going to work beautifully, but then I put it in there and it's dull, or the spaces don't work, or the drawing doesn't seem to, be proportionate to other things. And then I'll take that feedback from the painting and make a better painting out of it. So I don't have such a rigid plan that I can't pause to see what the painting has to say about it. And that sounds weird. It sounds almost schizophrenic. But I limit the dialogue I have with my painting to aesthetics, not any sort of personal issues. I promise. All right. This is becoming one of my favorite brushes. I like a really high-end brush for the like the big block and stuff, the filberts, and my detail brushes are usually pretty cheap. They're so fragile anyway. I painted with some really high quality detail brushes, and I do like them. I can feel the difference, but if they have a point and they're soft enough and they can survive at least like 2 or 3 washings, I'd call that a good brush. And this brush here, I really like. It's I don't know, super cheap. I mean, the cost doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just this is holding its point really, really well. So I really, really enjoy, rosemary brushes and things like that. They're really awesome. I would highly endorse them. But I don't know. I usually limit my really expensive brushes to those big block-in brushes. These, even with really high quality, they're going to start losing hairs and splay out just a little bit. You can take really good care of them and postpone that a little bit longer, but to hold up to the rigors of painting, unless you paint really soft and delicately, it's like, these brushes, they'll lose their spring, they'll lose their hairs, they'll lose and forget about it if you forget to wash your brushes 1 or 2 times, So this is actually much better than I anticipated. But again, I would never badmouth a really high quality brush company. Like Rosemary, but even Robert Simmons, really good brush company. Winsor Newton's Monarchs, I really like those. The synthetic mongoose. Other companies have synthetic mongoose, but they were kind of the first that piqued my attention. But I've tried I've tried other companies synthetic mongoose, and I really like those too. But those are my middle tier brushes. These are my detail brushes, and it's the detail brushes that I kind of like, that I can feel free to pitch them when they splay, not think that I just threw away a big investment. So I've told you about all the different goals that I had. If this part of the painting works, then I'll move on to this next part. If this part of the painting works, I'll move on to the next part. That kind of a conversation. I said I was going to work all these little transverse hatches that kind of wrap around this lip, and that it was okay that some of the paint was getting a little opaque. And now I'm starting to change my mind to think that, yeah, I could do that. It'd be no problem, but it'd probably be a better sitting if I just waited till the next one. So I'm going to finish this idea of just getting the shape better. I'll let all this opaque paint dry, because there's bigger fish to fry than trying to do those lines wet into wet, especially if the pattern doesn't work and I want to wipe it out. Then I'll have to either be super precise or I'll make mud. And I don't want to make mud. I actually don't even want to be super precise either. Like, this looks a little technical, but I wouldn't call it super precise. Like I got to watch Tony Waichula's paint. You want to talk about precise? Where my wife is a miniaturist, super precise. Like, those brush strokes had to be absolutely perfect on a painting that small. These are just suggestions. Maybe I'll put the highlight in. That'd be fun. Sorry if that's really obnoxious, me yawning every 5 minutes. Place that highlight and move on to another spot. Being imprecise. I had another mall stick slip. I'm catching him better now. All right, so this little section has little weaves that go over, and they'll have to arc just right, well, ish, according to perspective. I just have to have a system. I don't have to get them precisely right. I just have to have a system that shows that they wrap around according to eye level. But yeah, that'd be so much easier when it's dry. So I'm gonna hold off on that. Even though, like, originally I said I was gonna get to it. I lied. Hey, Lu Jing.
Hi, Hans.
Hey.
Yeah, just saw your Instagram post. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I said I'd get to the lace today, but
no problem. So are you just trying to add more details to the basket?
Well, one of my major goals was to get these little transverse lines, and they're only on sitting one.
Yeah, so you did some horizontal weaving, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so like the basket you were doing had those strong verticals that, you know, the main weaves go over, under, over, under. Well, not even on that one. The one before, though. This one is a totally different structure. It's like all of these are verticals. It's the horizontal ones that do the weaving part. So I really wanted those in. What I did to the table, the very first thing I did is I took a T-square to that table because it was kind of wonky, and I just darkened the foreground just a little bit. So that's all wet paint. I don't want to do the lace painting on wet paint.
Okay.
So the next sitting, I'm going to just get the big squint level shapes. Then that's going to dry, and then I'll do all that nitpicky weaving that's going to drive me crazy.
Okay, yeah, but I saw you made a lot of progress of the basket.
Yeah, it's good sitting. It's getting there. Slowly.
Yeah, basket, I know. Now I understand.
Yep, now you understand.
Yeah. Did you also work on the shell?
I did not work on the shell.
Okay.
I want to.
It looks nicer.
Yeah, I like the colors in it. I still don't feel like the highlights were quite right with the way they kind of melt instead of, these are still a little abrupt. And the iridescence in here, I'm going to play up a little bit more. But yeah, it's coming along. I like it.
Cool.
Definitely not saying anything like that as a complaint. Just talking about, what's in my head about it. And so I'm just kind of solidifying things. I was hoping the last sitting on the, like that rim here and the handle here, I was hoping that they'd be pretty close to be putting like some detail notes on it, but there's no rush. I'm just gonna set this up. All those little precise lines, they're really easy just to draw on with just like an umber. If I have to compete with the wet paint, it's doable. It's unnecessary. So you were there on sitting one when I wasn't quite feeling how this all fit, but it's looking better now. It got bigger by going down, and that did make the space between the handle and the shell a little smaller, but I don't think that matters. The one thing that I have to redraw is the way this this fringe connects into the handle. The handle definitely has to be woven on top of all that, so it needs to be a volume offset. And so that's a good thing to fix right now, is just to say that this has to cut in, and then the handle can begin. And it's not quite right yet. Some things I can get away with, but not that.
Yeah, I think because all these are detailed drawings, sometimes even a little bit off makes things look weird.
If your system looks good and it's not exactly like the original, I think you're okay. But in this,
I mean, sometimes the thickness of the weave if I didn't control it very well, then it looks funny.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. So what I'm saying here is like that doesn't make sense for the stuff that's fitting under the handle weave to be the same edge as the handle weave itself, because this is on top. It's like if you're painting a clothed figure, but the folds of the fabric go into where like an arm has to be. It makes no sense. And that was what's going on here. But again, it worked in the beginning when the handle was smaller and up a little higher, and then I brought the handle down, and now this doesn't work. So that stuff happens all the time. Like something changes and it throws off other things. And I guess either I didn't notice it or I just didn't feel like getting to it. Like sometimes you just run out of time. Whatever was in my head. Now it's better. Yeah, that's better. Okay. 11:15.
Are you going to work on the shell?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit. I don't want to work on this right now because I'm going to glaze it and then build it up again. I could get a little bit more technical with these weaves, but I just put a lot of thick paint on here, so probably better to not work on that for right now. I mean, I can work on these independently of that, but again, is that really that pressing right now? I don't know. One thing I mentioned is that when I put the idea that the shells are going to read through the openings and the slats, these slats got a little thinner. And so now this needs to get thinner, but this needs to be thinner than that. So I got to be on the lookout for relativity. If I shrink this down, then I really got to be careful that it doesn't become the same size or smaller back here. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time shrinking this down. Yeah, I could work on that today too. It's just a lot of stuff to get through in this painting. Not get through, but get to. Get through sounds like it's torture. That's going to be the lace. This stage isn't torture yet. Or at least it has been every time I've painted it. The one for the live contest, I have to say that one wasn't as bad. Well, first off, I had to do it a lot more efficiently because I had to do, let's say that painting was a 24 by 30. So I'd say at least 2 feet of it was, not 2 feet, maybe about 1.5 feet of that painting was lace tablecloth. And I had to do that in 2 days. So less than 16 hours, but not even that because I worked on other things. So I didn't have time to worry to like nitpick and get, too precise. I just had to fly, and I think it turned out pretty good. But I would enter more of those. What I want to do with the YouTube channel is get enough watch time. I almost have enough followers right now, but if I got enough watch time hours, then what I want to do is just challenge other artists to do just like these little competitions for charities or whatever, but we'll make it into like an interview for the people watching. And that'd be really fun. I really want to do that, but first things first. That little dot is so important. I put a mixed what I think would match the background, but I know it's going to be off. So I put a little dot. That little dot tells me so much. It means I'm not going to be spreading around a paint that's radically off. Now, no matter what I put on the background, it's not going to match perfectly because this is glaze. It's not, this is what I'm doing now is direct paint, whereas that's just scumbled on transparent paint. So no matter what I try to do the color match, it's not going to truly do it because you don't see the layers, but it's at least close enough to not be an eyesore. But that dot tells me everything. The dot tells me that it's either too light, too dark, which it was too light, too warm, too cool. It was too warm, too vivid in color. So I don't want it to stand out too much. All right, cool. Looking at the screens, let's come on. How do I get? Oh, there it is. All right. I could start putting the dots on this. These are pretty low in refinement. I could just put a little skim coat on those. I could trim these up. Where do I want to go next? I don't think I want to work on this yet. Although it would be fun. I don't know. I have to think about that. Well, I'm gonna work on this one for now. It's just gonna be a very simple half paste. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I want to warm it up. I'm gonna go pretty aggressive with the half paste. It's kind of got like an iridescence to it, but not nearly as much as that. And so this brown is going to be really nice for a base. I see it in there. I might even have to brighten up some areas in it, but I always exaggerate my glazes that I plan on just kind of changing big aspects. Like on the weave, drawing those drawing lines and hoping they turn from light to shadow because the value's underneath. That's kind of a different idea of what I'm doing right now. This is just blanketing this that I want it darker and warmer. So I made it too dark and too warm and scale it back. So if I didn't exaggerate, I'd lose it completely. And it would have no impact. But if if I wanted to paint it to the value that I wanted to end up, I'd have to put on really carefully and with more finesse, a lot less oil. And I'd rather just slap the paint on there, really. So that's what I did. So now I can just, when I put the highlights back on, these are really bright highlights. I don't know if I want them to be my brightest light, but they'll have a darker middle tone to read against, and that's really nice. It makes it a lot easier. But also too is I drew it in with lines that were maybe a little bit on the bold side, even though I blended it on the last sitting, but they were still a little choppy for what I wanted, and the glaze kind of pulls it together a little bit, especially when it had opacity like that half pace I just did. That really tampers down too much contrast. And you see how these highlights read a lot stronger because of that glaze. The other great part about glazes is you don't really have to worry about thickness of paint. And so if I think the drawing is okay, but the value range isn't perfect, or let's not even say perfect, but the value range isn't quite there, or the color isn't quite there, no big deal. Because a lot of times the glaze will pull it together without really any fuss at all. So my favorite aspect of painting is glazing. Love it.
Yeah, I like the glaze when there's a bright color underneath, then the kind of see-through. Yeah, that is really cool.
That's pretty tough though, because then you have to key it up so brightly that it looks bad for a while, and then you can glaze it, and then it'll look good. But yeah, you have that temporary time where it just looks bad. You just have to envision what it's going to look like.
That, at the end of the sitting, thinking about what I need to do for
next. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So I know a lot of artists that do the glazed grisaille, like they want to build up their painting just in monochromatic, just black and white, and it works for them. It doesn't work for me. I don't know. I'm never really satisfied from just what the glaze does to that sort of white and gray face. You have to key it up really bright, and you glaze that color on, but it's never as rich as what I usually get just from really direct paint. And I end up losing most of the glaze anyway.
I tried multiple ways, and I think somehow in some ways it doesn't look that bright or enriched.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen so many artists pull it off so beautifully. I would never say it's a bad method. It just doesn't work for me very well.
Yeah, it's just I think they have some tricks in the techniques probably.
Well, I mean, I know some of the tricks that I figured out just from having fun with it. Like this glaze that I did had a ton of oil in it, and the idea was to wipe it back. But with glazed grisaille, I don't do it that way. I hardly use any medium at all, and I scrub it on really pretty carefully. You have to counter the brush strokes and everything because you don't want to put streaks everywhere. At least with the less oil, it doesn't automatically streak up everything, but it works. It just doesn't have that boldness. You know what else bothers me about it? For my own painting, again, I really highly respect artists that use it. But the other thing that bothers me is that I don't get the thickness of the paint that I like. I like really nice impastos. And so if you put the glaze on and it gives you the value range of the grisaille underneath, that's great, but it has that sort of thin look to it, that delicate look. And then let's say you paint over that opaquely, well then you didn't get much benefit out of the glaze. And so I've done that a lot too, is where I did the glazed grisaille, I did everything according to what I'm supposed to do. And then I just wasn't satisfied with the boldness of the lights. And then I ended up painting it over it anyway. It was like I didn't really even use the glaze. But the glazes that I do, I go really, really crazy with that exaggeration. Just again, like this one, I wanted darker and warmer to read this bright and cool on top of it. And I went really crazy bold, then scaled it back, and now I can put my impastos on top without feeling like I'm protecting those glazes. They already did their job, so it's not like I'm relying on them to be the finished product. I don't know. Everyone's got their ways. If you get to a finished product in an efficient way, that's definitely the right way. I value efficiency more than most. Just I don't get to paint nearly as much as I should.
Yeah, I remember Beth once told me that when she was doing the rabbit painting, she did multiple layers of glazing for the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that looks cool.
It does.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to learn the animal painting from her.
Yeah, so she yeah, that was really intentional. She wanted the background to be mostly underpainting so that the bunny could really stand out, and she pulled it off really well.
Yeah, I think once in the Saturday class, she was telling me that how many layers of glaze she actually put, and every time she has to wait until it dries.
Yeah, I remember because I was in the studio, cool. And yeah, I was just commenting. It's like, wow, I couldn't be that patient. And here I am painting like texture madness here.
You're patient in another way.
Yeah, patient in a different way for sure. I like. I mean, my grandmother painted very much that the paintings look tight when you get back. I don't know, 10 feet from them, but when you get up close, those brush strokes are really disconnected and quite loose, and it's just a really neat effect. I do that a little bit, but not to the mastery she did. Now, I know it's not fair for me to compare myself to somebody who mastered it over decades and decades and decades, so I'm not doing that. It's like I had a student today copying a Sargent, wondering why they can't paint like Sargent. It's like, just saying paint like Sargent means that he was a pretty big deal. Like you have to earn that over a long period of time, and then maybe you'd hold a flame to him. but it's like you can hear yourself, right? But even so, like I have this PDF. If you want it, I can send it to you. It's about Sargent's technique, and it's funny because he didn't. It's not like he
sent me some booklets about Sargent.
Yeah, just like a PDF.
He has to actually work on it for many times. Every time when it doesn't work, he just wipe it off.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, until everything looks correct, and then to the viewers, it seems almost effortless.
Right, that's exactly right. And like the girls with the lanterns, like that painting took 3 years to do. It wasn't just like painting slapped in place, and he was so good that everything was like perfectly placed right off the bat. No, he wiped it back, he started again, he wiped it off again, started again. Yep.
So that one is the original one in Europe?
I couldn't tell you for sure.
Okay, yeah.
It's a famous one.
I can see the original one someday. Yeah, in the Boston Museum, there is a small, like a draft of that, only part of the whole painting. Yeah, he did some drafts and studies of that. Well, I think he must have like millions of that, and then eventually did the final product.
Well, what's cool is we have a whole book on El Jaleo, the one at the Gardner. Like that's right in your neck of the woods. In the Gardner, they had the El Jaleo, and we have an entire book that talks about his process and the sketches and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, you think that was a rapid painting, you're just wrong. It's a big painting too. It's really lovely. It's just such a great painting. Yeah, I was so happy to see it at the Gardner because like they have it in this dark room, and you have to get behind this like partition, and like there's usually a crowd around it. But yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like it's curving too much. Throw some pink in there. These shells do have a rhythm to them that you should probably get a little right with like the way the bands get thinner as they come up. I mean, I'm not gonna calculate like Fibonacci sequence here, but if I step back from it and I don't feel like it's cascading enough, then I'll do something about it. I feel like originally when the glaze got down, I felt like it was too dark, and now I'm questioning that. I don't think so anymore. So I might have to reestablish some darks in here. Or just wait till the next setting and glaze it again, which is totally a fine way of doing it. Kind of running out of steam because, well, right after that Saturday class, it was, off to all the madness of the kids, but in a great way. They're great kids, but they can drive all the energy out of you, especially when you live off of coffee all day. Stuff runs out.
How old is Avi now?
Speaking of Ollie, I think I hear him. He's 5. Let me just check on him real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, buddy. What's going on, sweet? What are you scared about? You sleep by yourself every night, look. Right. Just give me a little bit. I can come back up. You want to come down with me? Are they a little too big?
Yeah.
All right, you're gonna fall into the steps. It's okay. The floor is clean enough. Just watch your step. Okay. All right. So you're gonna help me finish this for the night, and then we gotta get you back to sleep. Yeah. Okay. All right, come on in. All right, you gotta give me a critique, okay? You know what critique means? You gonna tell me if it's good or bad? All right. Oh. Yeah. Say hi to the camera. Thank you. All right.
Hi. Hi.
He should be sleeping right now. He said he's scared. Right, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll spend a little bit of time on this, and then we're gonna go back to bed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You can't touch that though. That's really gross stuff. Cadmium red and lead white. And
Okay.
So what do you think? Think it's all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that was a mistake. Where were you on that one? Yeah, that's a big yawn. You should be sleeping, Dora.
Yeah.
What were you scared about? Did you have a nightmare?
Yeah.
What was the nightmare?
I don't know.
Don't know. Don't remember it. Yeah, I don't remember some dreams. But it was scary though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Everyone who's watching, no more cuss words, okay?
Okay.
Not you. You wouldn't do that, would you? No, of course not. I was just joking with them. They've been watching me paint and chatting with me, which I like. It's fun to paint with an audience. Unless it's going really badly, then you have to make a lot of excuses. Yeah, you can't stop yawning, can you? You should be sleeping. We're going to get you back to bed real soon. Okay?
Yeah.
I should get to sleep too, because I'm tired. Something about telling everybody you're going to paint gets you down here. That's a good thing. All right. So, Ollie, we got to get you back to sleep. Do you have to go to the bathroom or anything?
No.
No?
Then
What?
did you do the outside?
The outside of the shell?
Yeah.
What about it?
It's like a little bit dark.
A little darker here?
It's like
Should-
a little bit darker there.
Darker on the side of the painting?
So
Ah, okay. Let's do that right now.
Ali's making critiques.
Yep. He's got a good eye, don't you, buddy?
Yeah.
All right, how about darker right here?
Dark a little bit there.
Is that dark enough?
Yeah.
Yeah? Should it be a little warmer, or do you like it that black?
Blacker.
A little bit blacker. Okay. What if I put a little alizarin crimson in it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's rich. Whew, that's dark. Good call, Ollie. Good call. I'm going to take it down to like right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, that was bad brushstroke.
And I also see tan.
I see tan too. Yeah, I've been painting on that basket. A lot of tan. You know what it's called? That's called yellow ochre. Can you say yellow ochre?
Oh, okay.
Got it.
I
Nailed
know
it.
that one's.
Oh, don't, no touch, no touch, no touch. That's called cadmium red. That's real yucky. Real yucky stuff.
I was saying the other yellow.
The other yellow, that's cadmium too. Yeah, you don't want to touch that. All right, there you go. There's your darker corner. Looks good, bud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
See, my
Create some feeling of space.
my secret weapon. Bring out the 5-year-old anytime I'm stumped. I need to make it dramatic. Just have to have my son come down at inappropriate hours for a 5-year-old. Not going to win Parent of the Year for this one. I don't know. This has some kind of weird diagonals in it, and I don't know if I want to paint it that way. I might just paint it as if, I don't know, maybe. It doesn't look bad in real life. It's weird. It like kind of changes the pattern of everything else.
The basket that I'm working on also has some interesting weaves that I'm not sure if I want to paint that.
Yeah, as long
something not what I would expect to see.
If it looks structurally sound, like if there's not a pattern that somebody with their first impression wouldn't just pick up and think is wrong. Like sometimes you can paint it really accurate and it will look wrong. That's what I was saying with there's a weave here that, yeah, it probably makes sense in some level, but it looks wrong from this angle for this painting. And it's just, even if I got it exactly right, I don't think it would help the painting at all. So I'm going to ignore it. And so it sounds like that's the same case with your basket weave.
Yeah, I haven't added those two weaves. I'll see how the weaves look like next sitting and decide whether I want to add them back.
It can be true too, like if I'm painting a type of bird that I'm really not familiar with and there's something that I'm just confused about, sometimes I just look at it and think, I better paint it the way I see it, even though I can't make sense of it, just because somebody who recognizes these birds might expect it, right? And that's what makes it accurate for this bird. So like, I don't know, it's a little bit of both. For the weaves of the basket, it has some kind of structural anatomy to it that I feel like I can have a little bit of wiggle room with. In some subjects, I don't feel like that's the case. All right, you're yawning like crazy. I was yawning like crazy before. I'm going to call this in the next 2 minutes. Okay? You can hold tight for 2 minutes because I got to put my paints away. Well, I can do that after I get you to sleep.
Doesn't the paints go here?
My paints do not go there. They go on a little tile, and I put them under water, and then they don't dry out. Well, they do, but not fast. If I left them on the palette, they would turn into little rocks that I could have a really hard time getting rid of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want my paints to turn to rocks. I want to use it. I want to use my paints. So like your paints, they dry pretty quick too.
Yeah.
Mine dry slower than yours, but they're a lot more expensive too.
But you're stained.
They stink?
They're stained.
They stain. Yes, they do stain. Thought you said my paints stink. They can sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Might call this good enough for now. A little bit of highlights in there. And then you're going to have to wave goodbye to everybody, okay, Ollie?
No.
No? They want to see you. You're the star of the show here.
I just told you to walk up there.
What's that? Yeah. What'd you say?
Black.
Oh, it's really dark up there?
Yeah.
And that scared you?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. But I need you to get a good night's sleep for tomorrow, right? All right. I'll help you out with that in just a second. I just got to put my paints away. I got to say goodbye to everybody. And I'll say good enough for that shelf for right now.
I do it tomorrow.
I might not paint tomorrow. Maybe. It's a possibility. All right. I keep messing up my last brush stroke. All right, that's better. Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's say goodbye to the people who were very grateful they joined us.
Dad?
Yeah.
Go real.
It looks real? Thank you.
Yeah, that.
Yay. Thank you, Ollie.
Welcome.
Dunzo. All right. So, Ollie, I want you to look in the camera. Let me just say, thanks for joining and good night. Ready? Right here on the camera. Make sure they see your T-Rex on your shirt. Okay, thanks for joining and good night.
Thanks for joining. Good night.
That's so sweet. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.